Have you ever wondered about the strangest photos that time has forgotten? Today, we will reveal to you the strangest and most fascinating vintage photos that you will love. I promise you, enjoy the show. Behind-the-scenes shot of Kat Dennings and Beth Bears goofing around on the Two Broke Girls set. That chemistry you saw on screen, it was real. These two were just as close off camera. Who'd have thought a show about two waitresses trying to start a cupcake business would become one of TV's biggest hits? But these gals made it work. London, 1980. Princess Leia letting her guard down with the Empire's finest. Carrie Fisher always knew how to have fun with the fans during these promotional tours. Those original stormtrooper costumes weren't exactly built for comfort, but these guys managed to hold her up just fine. Love seeing the playful side of Star Wars when the cameras weren't rolling. Pan Am stewardess in the galley, 1950s. Back when flying was an event. Real china, metal cutlery, multi-course meals prepared fresh. That uniform was as prestigious as a military officer's back then. Pan Am only hired college-educated women who spoke at least 2 languages. These gals weren't just serving drinks. They were America's ambassadors in the sky. JFK prepping for a campaign speech in 1960. Classic Kennedy moment. All business in that sharp suit, reviewing every word. Even with all the pressure, he kept that cool that made America fall in love with him. That radiator and worn wooden floor tell you this wasn't some fancy venue, just another stop on the road to the White House. 1963, the original Ronald McDonald, played by Willard Scott. Look at that. Paper cup nose, wild wig, and those stripes, way different from the polished clown we know today. Scott was a local TV personality in D.C. before he became the first face of McDonald's, kind of unsettling by today's standards, but this character helped turn a small burger chain into a global empire. Queen Elizabeth II had 2 severely disabled secret cousins, Nerissa and Catherine, hidden from the public until 1987. Hollywood, 1952, opening night of Buona Devil, first color 3D movie. Kim Basinger at the Batman premiere, 89, pure 80s glam, sheer black top, red lips, that blonde hair. She played Vicky Vale in the film, but this look was more Gotham City nightlife than newspaper photographer. This was right when Tim Burton's Batman was about to change superhero movies forever. Lily Elsie with her snowman, 1909, one of London's biggest theater stars, caught in this magical winter moment. Those fancy Edwardian outfits didn't stop folks from having fun in the snow. Philly bar scene, 1974. Check out those matching outfits, studded mini dresses and patterned tights. Pure disco-era style. Back when every trendy bar was trying to copy Studio 54's glamour, right down to the cocktail waitress uniforms. That marble bar and chandelier in the background tells you this wasn't your average neighborhood tavern. Marilyn Monroe entertaining our boys in Korea, 1954. Shows drew crowds of over 100,000 troops. She later said these shows were the best experience of her life. Just a Hollywood star doing her part for the war effort. Early 80s, 2 musical titans hanging out. Michael at peak Thriller era. Freddie rocking that West Hollywood t-shirt. London, 1935. Members of Burma's Kayan tribe meeting a stoic palace guard. What a culture clash. Women wearing traditional brass neck coils face to face with Britain's famous bearskin-hatted guard. Paris, 1950. Frenchman's first taste of Coca-Cola and clearly not impressed. This was when Coke was spreading across Europe after the war. That expression is priceless. Probably expecting wine and getting bubbles instead. Great timing by the photographer, catching that spray. Early Hollywood, back when they were just making it up as they went along. Just dirt floors, a backdrop, and a couple of hand-cranked cameras. No fancy sound stages or special effects. Just pure movie magic in the making. That canvas umbrella was their idea of lighting control. Hard to believe this bare-bones setup would grow into the Hollywood we know today. Prince Albert, later King George VI, letting loose at a fairground, 1925. Still dressed to the nines in his bowler hat and three-piece suit while riding a slide. That's British royalty for you. Before he became king, before the king's speech, just a proper English gentleman having a bit of fun. Not exactly the dignified royal portrait you'd expect. What a meeting. Walt Disney and Roald Dahl in the early days. Before Dahl wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, he was an RAF pilot. That's why he's in that sharp suit. Wellington, 1981. Diana lookalikes lined up to surprise Prince Charles. The Diana fever was real back then. Every hairdresser in the world was copying that haircut, and these ladies took it to the next level with those ruffled collars and all. Must have been quite a sight for Charles. 5 lady dies instead of 1. Last photo of John Belushi at the Chateau Marmont, March 1982. Taken just hours before we lost him at 33. Still had that signature smirk, even at the end. Hard to believe the guy who made America laugh in Animal House and Blues Brothers would be gone the next day. Been over 40 years, but his comedy still hits just as hard. Here's a remarkable snapshot from '63. Jim Henson, with the newly created Rolf the dog, photographed in a Washington, D.C. TV studio. Henson, barely in his 20s, had no idea this shaggy character would become his first national TV star on The Jimmy Dean Show. For many of us who grew up watching TV in the '60s, this was our first taste of Muppet magic, long before Kermit and the gang became household names. Talk about a serious business. Here's a shot from 1947 of America's original tea sommeliers, the U.S. Board of Tea Experts. These fellows weren't just having a fancy tea party. They were the gatekeepers of every tea leaf entering the country. Look at that setup. Dozens of cups arranged like a military formation, cans of samples scattered across the table. Hard to believe now, but back then the government was so serious about tea quality that they actually had a Tea Importation Act from 1897. This right here is a real piece of American history. The very first aerial photograph that survived to tell its tale. Shot on October 13, 1860, from a hot air balloon floating above Boston by photographer James Wallace Black. Back then, Boston was a maze of crooked streets and brick buildings, looking more like a European city than the modern metropolis we know today. Just think about it. This photo was snapped a few months before the Civil War kicked off, when Abraham Lincoln was still president-elect. It's mind-boggling to realize our camera-filled world started with views like this. Oh man, this one hits right in the wallet. Check out those prices at the pump. 48.9 cents for unleaded. That's not a typo, folks. This shot from the mid-'70s shows what filling up used to cost before OPEC and the oil crisis turned our world upside down. That Chevy Nova in the photo probably guzzled gas like crazy. But who cared when it was this cheap? Now we're lucky if we can fill up without taking out a second mortgage. Makes you want to hop in that time machine and fill up a few hundred gas cans, doesn't it? Here's what passed for a modern kitchen. back in the 1930s. Would you look at those built-in cabinets? That was the height of luxury during the Depression era. All that storage space and a fancy porcelain sink with hot and cold running water. The small window above the sink was a godsend for housewives who spent hours there doing dishes, giving them at least a glimpse of the outside world. These kitchens were designed with efficiency in mind. No fancy granite countertops or stainless steel appliances, just clean, practical, and built to last. Pretty sure some of these cabinets are still standing in old farmhouses across America. Captured in 1929, we've got Miss America, Carrie Lee Carter, standing alongside Miss Philippines, Catherine Campbell. What really catches your eye here is how their styles mix American and Asian influences of the Roaring '20s. This wild shot from '73 shows Swedish powerhouse Leonard "Haw Haw" Dahlgren doing what looks like the world's most dangerous victory dance. Known for his showmanship as much as his strength, here he is literally jumping for joy over a successful lift. You've got to admire the guts of a guy who decides to leap around in a singlet with hundreds of pounds nearby. Talk about government overreach. This shot from the pinball prohibition era shows one of the craziest chapters in American entertainment history. From the 40s through the 70s, these gambling devices were considered as dangerous as slot machines. City officials, led by New York's Mayor LaGuardia, literally smashed them with sledgehammers and dumped them in the river. Can you believe it? They thought these machines were corrupting America's youth and funding the mob. Took until 1976 for New York to finally admit that pinball was a game of skill, not chance. Must have been quite a sight seeing men in suits destroying arcade games like they were taking down Al Capone's empire. This is one of the most remarkable Civil War photographs ever captured. Taken in 1862 at Antietam, it shows President Lincoln flanked by Allan Pinkerton. Yeah, the same Pinkerton who founded the famous detective agency, and Union General John McClernand. Lincoln, tall as ever in his signature stovepipe hat, stands between these two formidable figures at what would become the bloodiest single-day battle in American history. What's really something is that Pinkerton wasn't just playing bodyguard here. He was running the Union's entire intelligence operation. Now that's a fast food innovation from 1949. Before McDonald's took over the world, the Track restaurant in Los Angeles had this incredible system, real metal rails that delivered a burger right to your car. The striped awnings weren't just for beauty. They protected the food as it rolled down the rails to hungry customers in their brand new Pontiacs and Buicks. Imagine how exciting it was to watch your dinner ride like a miniature roller coaster ride. It's not just a launch, it's the historic moment on July 23, 1999, when Columbia went into space under the command of Eileen Collins, the first female shuttle commander. What a sight to behold! Solid fuel boosters light up the Florida night like a man-made sun. Columbia was our first orbiter, the pioneer of the fleet, and this time she was carrying NASA's most powerful X-ray telescope. Watching these launches from Cape Canaveral was something special. The sound hit you right in the chest, and you could feel the power with your whole body. Before us is a 1927 photo showing the start of work on Mount Rushmore, with workers hanging from what looks like ordinary ropes and wooden platforms. Today's safety inspectors would faint. They are carving Lincoln's face, and just look at the scale. The workers look like little spiders next to that giant nose. Sculptor Gutzon Borglum and his men used dynamite and jackhammers, working hundreds of feet high. No modern safety gear, just grit and determination to create something timeless. Talk about a high-stakes job. Here's a shot from 1927 showing the early work on Mount Rushmore, with workers dangling from what looks like nothing more than a few ropes and wooden platforms. OSHA would have a heart attack today. They're carving Lincoln's face, and just look at the scale of it. Those tiny workers look like spiders next to that massive nose. Gutzon Borglum, the sculptor, had his men using dynamite and jackhammers while hanging hundreds of feet in the air. No fancy safety equipment, just pure grit and determination to create something that would last forever. Here's a rare shot from the late 50s of Hollywood's ultimate blonde bombshells, Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield. They were often pitted against each other by the press, with Mansfield dubbed the working man's Monroe. Both were way smarter than their public image suggested. Marilyn was a voracious reader with an IQ of 168, and Jane spoke 5 languages and played violin. The studios might have tried to make them rivals, but they both carved their own paths in an industry that often tried to make them nothing more than blonde stereotypes. Here's Raquel Welch in her iconic costume from Myra Breckinridge, 1970, a film that was so controversial it nearly got banned. Talk about making a statement with stars and stripes. Welch was at the peak of her fame here, having already become a household name after 1 million years BC. The movie itself was a box office flop, but this image became one of the most memorable Hollywood publicity shots of the 70s. A powerhouse gathering from 76, music royalty letting loose at one table, Paul and Linda McCartney, Bob and Sarah Dillon, Cher with Greg Allman, a snapshot of rock's golden era, with marriages that wouldn't all survive the decade. By 77, both the Dillons and Cher and Allman would split. Only Paul and Linda's union stood the test of time, lasting until her passing in '98. What's striking is how casual it all looks, just some friends having drinks. Except these friends happen to be shaping American music history. A woman drinks from a common cup attached to a water pump. Chicago, 1899. What a snapshot of American automotive history. The contrast tells it all. From Ford's first rickety quadricycle of 1896 that looked more like a horseless carriage, to the 10 millionth Model T in 1924. That first contraption he built in his shed probably had his neighbors thinking he'd lost his mind. 28 years later, the Model T had completely transformed America, putting the country on wheels for just $260. From bicycle wheels to the car that changed everything, Ford's vision turned a tinkerer's dream into an industrial empire. Classic Mansfield moment at London's White Hart Lane in '59. The soccer match suddenly became the least interesting show in town when Hollywood's blonde bombshell appeared. Look at those faces in the crowd. British Reserve went right out the window. The Convair model 118, nicknamed the flying car, represents that wild, optimistic streak of post-war America in 1946. Everyone thought we'd be commuting by air within a decade. Just remove the wings and tail, and this bad boy would cruise down Main Street like any other car. Problem was, it turned out making a decent car that could also fly was about as practical as teaching a fish to ride a bicycle. Only 2 prototypes were ever built. Guess we weren't quite ready for the Jetsons' lifestyle after all. Two rebels of their time sharing a smoke in 1938, Coco Chanel and Salvador Dali. The fashion revolutionary meets the surrealist master. Both turned their worlds upside down. She freed women from corsets and made pants fashionable, while he melted clocks and painted elephants with spider legs. Their meeting feels almost inevitable. Two artists who broke all the rules and wrote their own. Chanel in her signature tweed, dripping in pearls, perfectly captured in this candid moment with the master of the melting clock. The ultimate rebel playing a Roman, Marlon Brando taking a cigarette break on the set of Julius Caesar in 1953. The guy who revolutionized method acting was playing Mark Antony, and MGM executives thought casting him was crazy. But Brando showed them. His famous Friends, Romans, Countrymen speech shut up every critic who said a guy from A Streetcar Named Desire couldn't handle Shakespeare. Even in a toga between takes, he's got that unmistakable Brando intensity, the same look that would later make him Don Corleone. Pure 70s gold, Farrah Fawcett flashing that $1 million smile that launched 1,000 posters. That famous feathered hairdo became the most copied style of the decade. Every salon in America had women bringing in her picture saying, "Make me look like that." When she hit our screens in Charlie's Angels, she wasn't just another TV star. She became the ultimate California girl, mixing beauty with a tough-as-nails attitude. That red swimsuit poster sold 12 million copies, probably still hanging in some garages across America. It's 1966, and Michelle Phillips embodied that pure California dream the mamas and the papas sang about. Just look at that face. Barely 22 years old, wearing that perfect pastel turtleneck and hippie jewelry, right when California Dreamin' was climbing the charts. The band might have been singing about missing LA's warmth on a cold winter's day, but Michelle was the sunshine personified.